Hey guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today's video is the first build guide of the new episode, and it's one I'm really excited to show off because it's a very fun playstyle, and honestly, I haven't really made a Void Titan build in forever. I'm essentially combining a new exotic armor rework along with some new Void aspect enhancements to create one of the most fun builds I've had on Titan in a very long time, and it's also very refreshing because this one isn't explicitly melee focused like a lot of Titan builds are. Some brief highlights of the build include constant devour and void overshields for great survivability, along with a ton of weapon enhancement damage that allows our Manticore to deal almost 6 times the damage it normally deals, along with having access to volatile rounds, a ton of air mobility thanks to Mountaintop and Manticore itself, along with tons of high damage options such as Edge Transit or a super that allow us to have an instant delete button should we need it. There's a lot more going on with this build, so let's get right into the subclass. For our super, you can really use whichever of the 3 you want to use. Twilight Arsenal, in my opinion, is just the best out of the supers here provided. Bubble doesn't really offer anything too crazy besides a basic empowering buff, which could be used to enhance Manticore's damage even further. However, I just don't find that it's very effective to use in PvE, and overall it's kind of an underwhelming super, and Sentinel Shield just isn't good. That's it, it's just not good. Twilight Arsenal is just the best super in my opinion, but with that said, if you wanted to use the other 2, you absolutely can. For your melee ability, go with Shield Throw. Now, if you've watched my previous video on why I don't like various aspects of Prismatic Titan, Shield Throw is just not a good melee. You can use Shield Bash instead, but there is a reason we're using Shield Throw today. The main reason is that it's a ranged option that we can also use mid-hover with Manticore without breaking our hover. Shield Bash is a better melee in my opinion, but it basically goes against the entire playstyle we're achieving today and makes us lose out on a lot of the effects we're relying on for survivability. So with that said, you can use Shield Bash, but I do believe Shield Throw is just a better fit for the playstyle, and overall when combined with something like Offensive Bulwark, it can hit pretty hard and has a lot of other benefits attached to it. For your grenade, it actually doesn't matter which one you choose. Something you guys might not know is that Unbreakable actually overrides the base cooldown of any grenade, so realistically, pick whatever you want here, it's not actually going to matter. For your aspects though, the first one we're going with is Offensive Bulwark. In short, while you have an overshield, your grenade charges incredibly quickly, you gain an increase to your melee damage and melee lunge range, and melee final blows restore a small portion of your overshield and will extend its duration. For the next aspect, we have Unbreakable. In short, this got a lot of buffs going into this episode, but mechanically it works the exact same. You hold your grenade button, you activate the shield, and you can walk around and block damage with it, and based on the amount of damage that you block, it scales the damage that this thing will deal once blocking ends, and you release a Void Blast in front of you. While you're blocking, you have a 95% damage resistance, which is kind of crazy for PvE. For those that don't know, that's basically like blocking with an aggressive ranged sword while Strongholds is equipped, so you have a ton of damage resistance while you're blocking. Also, while you're blocking, you will continually get Void Overshield slowly stacked on top of you, and of course we already went over the benefits of having a Void Overshield with Offensive Bulwark. Unbreakable with this build is going to serve as a great way to get our weakening chaining activated, as well as give us another avenue for a Void Overshield on top of our exotic weapon and Shield Throw. Onto the fragments then, this is where you're going to see a lot of the status chaining actually occur in the build, so stay with me because I'm probably going to be jumping from a few different UIs here in a second. First off, we have Echo of Harvest. Anytime you defeat a weakened target, it'll create an Orb of Power and a Void Breach. The Orb of Power is nice as it gives us a ton of different benefits for this build, but the main reason we're using it is the Void Breach, because thanks to the seasonal artifact, anytime that we pick up a Void Breach with Supernova, the next source of damage causes us to release a large weakening pulse. This works great with Echo of Harvest because it means that we get that Void Breach back and can effectively chain a 15% debuff just using our weapon without using any of our abilities. Thanks to Echo of Undermining, we can allow our grenade ability through Unbreakable that has a ton of regen intrinsically thanks to Offensive Bulwark, get us started on the whole weakening chain, and we have a ton of other buffs from killing those weakened enemies. We also have Echo of Instability, which defeating targets with our grenade grants us volatile rounds, so again, not only is getting kills with Unbreakable starting our weakening chain, which is theoretically infinite, but it's also granting us a brief period of volatile rounds, and again with a 400% grenade regen, we can get Unbreakable back incredibly quickly. The next fragment is Echo of Cessation. There are 2 main reasons behind why we're using this. The first one is finisher final blows create a burst of void damage that also make nearby enemies volatile. We can stack this with the seasonal artifact using Debilitating Wave, allowing us to emit another source of void damage from that same finisher. And if we pair this with the tonic, that void damage explosion will also cause a weakening effect. meaning that if you wanted to, you could build into this finisher aspect even more, allowing you to not only make enemies volatile with your finisher, but also weaken them with your finisher, which allows the whole Echo of Harvest chaining effect to work even better. I'm personally not doing that, but again, that is something you can do with this build. The next reason we're using Echo of Cessation is that defeating volatile targets creates a Void Breach. This on its own allows us another avenue for getting that Void Breach, and then again continuing the weakening chain. The next one is Echo of Undermining, which lets our Void Grenade weaken targets. The main reason behind using this is it lets Unbreakable debuff on hit, which perfectly lets it set up Echo of Harvest and the weakening chain. The other reason we're using Echo of Undermining has to deal with the seasonal artifact, and I'll just jump to that right now. In the seasonal artifact, we have Power from Pain, which rapid final blows against weakened targets grants us Devour. And we can actually boost this with a tonic, which is what I'm doing, which allows any weakened target to spawn a Void Breach when defeated, which is another way that we can spawn a Void Breach, which means that we can chain Supernova even better. This basically lets us have free Devour effectively forever without actually committing a fragment to it or using something like Controlled Demolition to rely on our health regen. I'm also using Total Carnage, which gives us damage resistance when we finish a powerful combatant. This of course can stack with our other damage resist effects like our tier 10 Resilience or Void Overshield's intrinsic damage resistance. And in short, it pairs really nicely with the other effect provided by Echo of Cessation, allowing these finishers not only to make us stronger, but to make nearby enemies volatile, and of course, depending upon the tonic you're using, you can also have it weaken nearby enemies, feeding into the Supernova weakening chain. Besides that, I'm also going with Concussive Reload. Whenever you use a grenade launcher to damage a boss or champion or break an enemy shield, it'll weaken them. Again, another way to apply the Supernova chaining effect, and also just a nice way to deal a quick chunk of damage to an enemy and prime them for a different DPS option, like our Super or Heavy GL for example. And then again, we have Supernova and Power from Pain, which I already went over. And the final one is Kinetic Impacts. Sustained damage with a power grenade launcher emits a kinetic tremor from that enemy, dealing a ton of AoE damage, and can also stagger unstoppable champions. The main reason behind using this is for stuff like Edge Transit when we need to use it for high burst DPS, and also the fact that it offers a very good way to stun unstoppable champions that this build really doesn't have good access to with the weapons I'm using. But with Kinetic Impacts, it's a very easy option to damage and stagger unstoppable champions. With that in mind, you could use Served Cold with this build. In short, picking up a Void Breach will grant you melee energy, and we're generating a ton of Void Breaches with this build. The main reason I'm not though is because the energy that you get back is only about 10 to 15%, and there does seem to be a short cooldown on this internally. Again, if you want to specialize in getting your melee back as fast as possible, then yes, Served Cold is your best option. I just personally don't really rely on melee too much just because it's overall not fantastic, although this build has a lot of enhancements for it. So in short, if you're not using a heavy GL and you don't really have to worry about unstoppable champions, you can always use Served Cold and build into your melee regen a lot more effectively. Moving on to the armor mods. For our helmet, I'm using a stack of heavy ammo finder and special ammo finder, just allowing our exotic primary to have a lot more ammo drops to support our special and power weapon. I'm also using a stack of harmonic siphon just to allow our void primary to generate a ton of orbs of power as we get a ton of kills. For our gauntlets, I'm using a stack of firepower, which with one stack allows our grenade to create an orb of power on kill every 10 seconds. This is about how long our grenade regen takes to begin with, so having one stack of firepower essentially guarantees us an orb of power every time that we actually use our unbreakable ability. I'm also pairing this with a stack of harmonic loader just to support our void weapons, as well as momentum transfer, which anytime we cause damage with our grenade, it reduces our melee cooldown. Again, our melee isn't a big focus of this build, but with how much we're using our grenade, this seems like the best benefit in my opinion to actually support the rest of the build, because we do get some benefits by using our shield throw. For a chest piece, it's really up to you whichever you would prefer using. I would go with some combination of resistances based on the activity you're in, and reserves depending upon the weapons you're using. Again, if you wanted to go to your chest piece and swap out a resist combination and go with something like harmonic reserves to support a void heavy weapon, you can absolutely do that, or use some combination of resist depending upon the activity that you're in. Finally, onto the exotic and the boots for today is Peacekeepers. Now, if you haven't seen recent patch notes, you might be wondering why Peacekeepers is in a PvE build guide. In short, not only does it offer a ton of benefits for submachine guns like handling improvements, movement speed, and also auto-loading capabilities when machine guns are stowed, but also there's a new PvE perk that Peacekeepers has that effectively allows you to stack damage on an SMG up to 100% more damage, or a 2 times damage increase. This effect basically stacks up to 20 times, and you get 1 stack per shot hit on an enemy. As you deal damage with an SMG, it'll slowly go from 1 to 20 stacks and provide you an increasing damage bonus, which once again at 20 stacks is a double damage increase. When combining this damage increase with other intrinsic damage increases like found on Manticore, this lets SMGs not only just function as a general ad clearing tool, but can also deal some ridiculously high damage, shredding majors, champions, and even mini bosses when done properly. So in short, for us Titans, we can basically think of Peacekeepers as a sort of lucky pants effect for SMGs, not as strong but a lot easier to use. For the actual mods on our Peacekeepers though, I'm going with 3 stacks of Void Weapon Surges just to benefit our Void Weapons the most damage-wise, allowing them to hit 22% harder anytime we have a stack of Armor Charge. Again, as with basically any build that I say, fit this to your playstyle. If you'd want to swap one of these out for say something like Recuperation, giving you health on orb pickup, or something like a Void Scavenger mod for example, you can absolutely do that too. I'm just using this to best fit the playstyle I've made with this, but again, fit this out to your liking. And then finally, onto our mark, I have a stack of Time Dilation, which brings the decay effect for something like Void Surge from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. I'm also pairing this with Proximity Ward, which gives us a powerful overshield when we perform our finisher. This overshield is only active during the finisher, so it's not meant to kind of chain this effect over, and we don't really want to consume our armor charge effects because that'll get rid of our weapon surges. Proximity Ward is here just to keep us alive and protect us from other enemies while we're performing our finisher, mainly to achieve the benefits provided from stuff like Echo of Cessation, as well as with the Artifact mod giving us stuff like Debilitating Wave with the potential boost that I went over earlier. For the final mod, it's really up to you. I'm just personally using Powerful Attraction as an instant pickup option for any nearby orbs of power in case we need to refresh our Void Weapon Surges. In truth, I'm only using Powerful Attraction as that instant orb pickup, so if you want to swap it out for something like Time Dilation, or even something like Bulwark Finisher, which allows your finishers to generate you a Void Overshield, you can absolutely do that. Finally, onto the weapons I would personally use with this build. The first one I'm using is Manticore, and this is mandatory for this kind of build because of all the different effects that it offers. There are 2 main reasons for using Manticore. The first is Swooping Talons, which while we're airborne, it increases the damage output that Manticore actually does, again up to 100% intrinsically, and of course this stacks with Peacekeeper's own 100% damage increase. The other reason is the Manticore Catalyst, which while we're airborne and benefiting from Swooping Talons and Peacekeeper's damage bonus at the same time, we're also getting periodic Void Overshields anytime we defeat an enemy or continually damage a powerful combatant. While we're airborne, it also reduces combatant accuracy, meaning we're harder to hit and therefore take less damage, and also returns ammo to the magazine, which means that once we activate the repulsors and actually can hover, this thing becomes an absolute monster and starts shredding anything in front of it. Stacking on top volatile rounds is just another way to get even more damage from this weapon, but in short, we have a 100% damage increase from Swooping Talons, 100% from Peacekeepers, a 22% damage bonus from Void Weapon Surges, as well as having our own weakening effects providing a 15% debuff on hit through Manticore. Summarized, when all these effects are taken into account, you're dealing roughly 5.5 times the base damage of Manticore, and this gets even better whenever you consider the fact that we don't have an empowering buff and we're not including a Void Surge. So if you wanted to, this effect can become much stronger. As far as other weapons to pair with Manticore, it's really up to you and your own playstyle, but here are the weapons that I personally think work best. The first one is Mountaintop, specifically with auto-loading and recombination, but there are a variety of different perks you can actually choose from with this. The 2 main reasons we're using Mountaintop is that it's an auto-loading GL, which works great with the auto-loading effect of Peacekeepers, meaning that anytime we run out of ammo on Manticore, we can either reload it, or we can simply stow it and have Peacekeepers do it for us, pull out something like Mountaintop, which has its own auto-loading capability to do some quick burst DPS. And the other reason is thanks to the micro-missile frame, we actually have a lot of movement capabilities, meaning we can shoot this at the ground, get extremely high up in the air, and then fire Manticore and hover up there. So again, Mountaintop offers us a good choice for burst DPS as well as some movement capabilities that other weapons really just don't offer as a legendary weapon. For your power weapon, I highly recommend Edge Transit. It's one of the best heavy weapons in the entire game. I can't really say anything about it that you haven't already heard it before. Again, it's a fantastic heavy weapon. I have mine with Bait and Switch and Envious Assassin, meaning that after we get a bunch of kills with Manticore, we can swap to this thing with an immense amount of ammo in its magazine and dump for a ton of DPS. Realistically though, any heavy weapon works great. Again, you don't have to use a heavy GL or specifically Edge Transit if you don't want to. Again, I'm mainly using it for kinetic impacts, but if you wanted to, another Void Heavy would work fantastic. Say a Void Rocket Launcher like Braytech Osprey, or if you want to use something like an Eager Edge Sword for even more movement potential, you can do that too. All in all guys, that's the build for today. Like I mentioned before, I'm mainly doing this for 2 reasons. One, I haven't made a Void video in forever, and Void Titan has kind of felt pretty weak for a while now, but with the new buffs and changes to certain armors, it feels incredible to play. In addition, it's a nice weapon-focused Titan build, as I feel most Titan builds are just kind of melee-focused today because that's how they're designed to be good, and so this is a nice alternative in case you want to mix up your playstyle. This is quickly becoming a favorite build of mine and something I'm using for a variety of content, and I hope you guys have as much fun with it as I've been having. Sorry if my voice has been a little bit off this video, I'm actually feeling a bit under the weather, and sorry for the delayed upload. I actually got married in one of my honeymoon basically as soon as the new episode dropped, so I'm finally getting back into Destiny 2 and currently working on a ton of different videos, so stay tuned for that. Let me know what you guys thought of the build down in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, I greatly appreciate your continued support on these videos, and as always, have a good day.